Security of Farm Workers Project is a project established by Lawyers for Human Rights during the early 90s. Its role largely is to protect the rights of farm workers, particularly their rights to security of tenure. The Security of Farm Workers Project is based in Stellenbosch, which is a town in the Western Cape province of South Africa. We currently have two attorneys, myself and my colleague Annelie du Plessis. We have two candidate attorneys as well, and an intern, and two administrative staff. Evictions, particularly from farms, are a huge problem in South Africa. This project was established in the early 90s to deal with the first wave of evictions from farms after the coming into effect of new legislation regulating conditions on farms, which then led to a massive increase in evictions. So these are largely cases of people that have been living on farms their whole lives, that then are either retrenched or dismissed, and then the consequence of that is that the owner of the farms brings applications to court in some cases. In some cases it's straightforward illegal evictions. In many of the farms on the Western Cape, people that are living on farms and working on farms are living in very abysmal living conditions. In many cases, there's no access to electricity, there's no access to sufficient water, and the actual conditions of the structures themselves are often very much neglected. And one of the difficulties is that there's no legislation that regulates the particular standard of accommodation that has to be supplied. The Mitchell's Plain case is a large and very difficult eviction case because it raises some very complex problems. Essentially what happened is that there's a major housing crisis in Mitchell's Plain. There's a housing backlog of over 400,000 people on the housing waiting list, and increased desperation on the part of people specifically living in the backyard of someone else's house and don't have access to services, live in very difficult conditions. Essentially what happened is that all of these conditions then, essentially just started to get onto the boil and led to what the city has called a land invasion early in May, where approximately 4,000 people occupied vacant land out of frustration and desperation with their own circumstances. The city has brought an application to evict them from that land, and the matter is now currently in court. It's likely to be argued on the 30th of this month. The conditions, particularly on one area which is called Swartklip, are very bad. These people are living literally with no roof over their head. They're living out in the open. And there's the main reason for that is that prior to LHR getting involved, the city obtained an interdict. And the terms of that interdict were that people were not permitted to erect any kind of permanent structure. So every time they put up a permanent structure, the city is allowed to effectively take it down. So what happens is that people put up these, semi-formal type of tents during the day and then take them down and then put them up again at night. And so there's no access to sanitation or water or anything like that, electricity. So the conditions are very bad. There's approximately 8 or 9 children, if I understand it. A lot of the households that are living there are female-headed households, a single woman with children. So it's a very difficult situation for the children specifically. Well, I think this area of work is increasingly important because tenure issues and the situation of people living in rural areas has largely been neglected in the development, particularly of progressive jurisprudence around socioeconomic rights. I think this group can largely be described as the hidden people. people that are often neglected in the formulation of policy, that are living on the periphery of the urban environments where many of these debates around housing and access to housing occur. And the difficulty with it is that if it's not properly addressed, it's going to make the problem worse, because what will happen is that people will increasingly move, because of pressures and inability to have livelihoods in the rural areas, will move to urban areas and then place increasing strain on resources that are available to meet housing needs.